The summer sun over Montana's Camp Inferior Pond was pulling no punches that day, drenching the entire lakeside in that special kind of heat that makes you question humanity's decision to invent summer camps in the first place. 23 human children, or as the galaxy would soon call them, problem units, were scattered across the grounds, either throwing stones, splashing in the lake, or devising plots to outwit the counselors who thought sunscreen and Capri Sun counted as supervision. At the water's edge, Jack Alpha Monroe, an 11-year-old with a deadly aim and even deadlier sarcasm, was skipping stones. Not just skipping, dominating. Every rock he hurled skimmed the water surface at least 4 times, sometimes 5, and each one landed with that satisfying plunk that said, "Physics? I laugh at physics." Behind him, perched regally beneath the camp's lone shade tree like some exiled star princess, sat his twin sister, Nova. I read books on stars to feel smarter than you, Monroe, nose buried in her book about constellations and black holes, ignoring everyone with quiet determination. Nearby, Jack's best friend and camp's unofficial resident tech gremlin, Wrench Boy, nay Noah, stood with arms crossed, squinting at the lake as though it had personally offended him. "I bet I can make it skip 6 times, Wrench Boy said, finally. Jack smirked without even turning around. "Sure, and I bet I can invent warp drive with this stick I'm holding." "Go ahead, Einstein." Wrench Boy, undeterred by the sarcasm, plucked the flattest, smoothest rock from the shore and hurled it with all the righteous vengeance of someone who's been underestimated too many times. The rock skipped 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then plop. 5. "Congratulations, you've tied me at being mediocre," Jack announced. "Almost," Wrench Boy muttered. "My turn again," Jack said, already picking up another stone. The counselors were back at the picnic tables, working valiantly to open bags of chips without tearing them like savages. The other kids splashed and yelled and tripped over one another. The usual Lord of the Flies meets Pinterest dynamic that happens when adults believe children can self-regulate. And then the sky fell. At first it was just a shadow, not like a cute little cloud passing overhead. No, this was a big boy shadow. One moment the world was all blazing blue and sunshine. The next it was dark, as if the sun had decided it was clocking out early. Everyone froze. Even the counselors, who were mid-argument about mayonnaise, looked up. What hung over them was, well, imagine a football stadium crossed with a mechanical egg and then spray-painted with alien glow sticks. It was massive. It hovered just above the lake, casting its oval silhouette across the water, while dozens of strange, shimmering lights ran along its edges like some kind of cosmic mood ring. "What is that?" Nova whispered, lowering her book as if somehow literature could save her now. "Alien blimp," Jack said immediately, because of course he did. The counselors snapped back to life first, shouting everyone, "Main building. Now, move." The kids, whose fight-or-flight instincts were finely tuned after years of dodgeball and cafeteria politics, bolted toward the main lodge. That's when the beams came down. Bright blue columns of light slammed into the ground, crackling and humming with a sound that can only be described as the universe saying nope. One landed right in front of Nova, who froze as her body began to feel light, as a no longer obeying gravity light. "Jack!" she screamed. Jack spun around just in time to see his sister slowly ascending into the air, limbs stiff, caught inside one of the beams like a fly in amber. He did what any proper brother would do. He ran straight into the beam after her. Bad idea. He was immediately caught, lifted clean off the ground, and rendered as helpless as an ant in a shot glass. "Hey!" Wrench Boy called, diving heroically at Jack's legs, only to be zapped into his own personal beam of paralysis. Within seconds, all 23 kids, every last one of them, from the kid who cried when he missed snack time to the girl who could throw a perfect curveball, were frozen mid-scream, mid-run, mid-escape. The counselors stood helpless, their own attempts to intervene failing as radios died, phones fizzled, and even the camp's one sad little truck sputtered into silence. One counselor, Pete, the camp's designated guy who looks useful, sprinted to the truck anyway, trying the CB radio. Dead. On the shore, The children rose higher and higher toward the colossal ship that had the audacity to abduct 23 humans at once. And then they were gone. The ship didn't even make a sound as it shot upward, faster than anything the human eye could comfortably track, vanishing into the sky and leaving nothing behind but empty footprints and the faint smell of ozone. High above Earth, inside the ship, Jack landed unceremoniously on a cold metal floor that glowed faintly green, the kind of green that says we spent a lot of money making this look sinister. The kids stumbled to their feet one by one, looking around at the featureless room. No windows. One door that looked like it had been designed by a committee of engineers with no concept of comfort. "Is everyone okay?" Jack asked, managing to sound brave despite still being caught somewhere between panic and teenage bravado. Nova, still counting heads like a boss, called out, "All 23 accounted for. But where is here?" Wrench Boy walked over to the wall and touched it, muttering to himself, "Not metal. Or, not any metal we've got." The door hissed open. That's when the real fun began. In walked 3 creatures that made cockroaches look like fluffy puppies. Tall, spindly, walking on 2 legs with 4 arms apiece. Their eyes huge and faceted like someone had glued a disco ball to their faces. Their carapaces shimmered dark green and brown. Their movements a series of mechanical clicks and jerks. They stopped, surveyed the kids, and began clicking to each other in what sounded like an incredibly judgmental Morse code. One of them held up a little device that blinked with lights before speaking in a flat, robotic voice. "Specimens acquired. Beginning research process. Human young appear to be in adequate condition." Jack stepped forward like a man who had absolutely no idea what he was doing, but was too stubborn to back down now. "We're not specimens," he said. This, apparently, surprised the cockroach overlords. More frantic clicking, which the translator rendered as, "Specimens show signs of intelligence. This will make research more valuable." Nova glared at them and planted her feet. "Let's go home," she demanded. The cockroaches ignored her completely and began moving about the room, sticking scanning devices on the walls and scanning the kids from head to toe with what looked like glowing hairdryers. Outside the ship, far below, the counselors at Camp Inferior Pond could only watch as the strange oval ship shot up into the heavens. In seconds, it was gone. It left nothing behind but silence. Empty shoes where a few kids had been scooped mid-step, and a handful of very traumatized counselors who would later have a lot of explaining to do to the parents. Far, far above Earth, the alien ship entered hyperspace, carrying its 23 human problems toward the stars. Back in the giant green room, Jack sat on the floor with his arms crossed. Nova sat beside him, still scowling, while Wrench Boy poked at the wall experimentally. The kids were scared, but they were also already quietly calculating, already scheming, already thinking the same thing. "We're going to get out of this, and then you're going to regret every second of it." The clackaroaches had no idea what they'd just unleashed. The clackaroaches had done it. They'd successfully scooped up 23 human children like they were collecting seashells, stuffed them into their big shiny bug box, and zipped off into hyperspace, all without so much as an interstellar parking ticket. From their perspective, it was a clean operation. Specimens acquired, research proceeding, no property damage, no deaths. They even managed to avoid vaporizing the camp counselors, a feat of restraint they'd surely get a commendation for back home. From the kids' perspective, less clean and more kidnapped by oversized insects running a floating prison. Inside the bug box, Jack sat against one glowing green wall, watching as the clackaroaches moved around the room, fussing with their little blinking contraptions and completely ignoring the fact that 23 pairs of human eyes were glaring holes through their carapaces. Nova sat next to Jack, arms crossed, her book about constellations abandoned somewhere in the corner. The page she'd been reading, something about black holes, now seemed laughably quaint compared to being inside one. Wrench Boy, as expected, was crawling on his hands and knees, running his fingers along the seams of the walls, muttering things like, "Not a weld, not a seam, probably a thermal composite alloy. Cute." One of the clackaroaches paused its clicking and actually tilted its big disco ball eyes in his direction, but decided it wasn't worth the trouble. After a few minutes of clicking to one another in that smug insect dialect, 3 of the creatures left, leaving 1 to monitor the kids. Specimens will remain here until scans are complete. The translator chirped from the glowing device on the guard's hip. Jack raised his hand. Hi, not specimens. Children. Human children. You know, sentient beings? Opposable thumbs? Invented rocketry before we invented decent healthcare? The guard didn't even glance at him. Nova added, and we'd like to go home now. Still nothing. Wrenchboy snorted. Oh yeah, that'll work. Just ask politely, Nova. Nova shot him a look that suggested he might not make it to see the escape plan come to fruition. Meanwhile, far, far away, on the neutral planet Nexus, the Galactic Confederation's Grand Council chamber was alive with the soothing hum of bureaucratic incompetence. Dozens of species milled about, chirping, hissing, and flapping their appendages, utterly oblivious to the quiet little memo that had just landed on Commander Krellface's datapad. Krellface, tall, terrifying, and wrapped in perfectly groomed green scales, sat at his usual seat near the back of the chamber, sipping something dark and viscous that was probably illegal in 3-star systems. The memo was short, but its contents made his scales blanch to a pale, sickly yellow. Subject: ZTH Research Expedition. Earth Specimen Collection Successful. Cargo: 23 human young. Destination: Cygnus Research Facility. Krellface blinked, then blinked again. They what? He muttered. His tiny, bird-like assistant, Pip, looked up from her own datapad, fluffing her feathers nervously. Something wrong, Commander? Krellface stood so fast his chair clattered to the floor. Call an emergency council session. Now. Pip hesitated. But, sir, that's only for wars or catastrophes. Krellface finished for her. He narrowed his eyes. And they just invited both. 1 hour later, the Confederation Council chamber was packed. Representatives from 32 species sat in their appointed seats, buzzing with confusion and mild irritation. Emergency sessions were rare, and most assumed Krellface was just being dramatic again. The doors slammed open and the ZTH delegation scuttled in, clicking softly to themselves, confused but confident, because in their minds, nothing illegal had occurred. When everyone was seated, Krellface rose, his imposing 7-foot frame casting a long shadow across the circular table. I have called this session to address a grave threat to all of us, he announced. The room quieted. The ZTH research vessel hive mind has abducted 23 human children from Earth. Silence. And then, laughter. Actual laughter. One frog-faced ambassador from the aquatic colonies chortled into his cup. Humans? What are they going to do? Throw rocks at us? Another representative, some squid thing, muttered, it's not even a protected planet. They still use fossil fuels for crying out loud. Krellface slammed his clawed fist on the table. The sound echoed through the chamber like thunder. Do you idiots even know what humans are? He roared. That shut them up. The ZTH representative stood, clicking indignantly. Earth is not a protected world. Their technology level allows for research protocols. We have done nothing wrong. Krellface moved so fast that no one even saw him cross the room. 1 second, he was at his seat. The next, he was inches from the ZTH's glittering eyes. You captured human children, he hissed. Are you insane? The room froze. Krellface was known for his icy diplomacy. No one had ever seen him lose his cool before. The ZTH tried to stand its ground. Our research is legal. The specimens, they are not specimens. Krellface's voice dropped to a deadly whisper. They are human children, and you have just put the entire galaxy at risk. At this point, the elder of the Volks, a species older than most solar systems, finally spoke up. Krellface is correct, the elder croaked. Humans are listed under the secret protocols. Do not provoke. There were gasps. The ZTH shuffled uneasily. Krellface activated the central holo display. Most of you have never studied Earth, as I have. Let me show you. On the screen, images of Earth flashed in rapid succession. Wright brothers' first flight. Hiroshima. Moon landing. Mars rover. Microchips. Artificial intelligence. Nuclear tests. They've done this, Krellface said coldly, in just 100 of their years. Their rate of advancement is unmatched. They are predators who built civilization while still fighting each other for sport. And now you've taken their young. He zoomed in on an old classified file. Incident report, Earth, expedition crash, year 1724. Outcome, entire crew hunted down on foot by humans using muskets and knives. No survivors. The room went dead silent. They call it Mama Bear Syndrome, Krellface explained. When threatened, particularly when they're young, are threatened, they lose all sense of reason. They will not stop until they get them back. And if they can't, they'll make sure nobody else gets them either. One of the ZTH finally spoke. What do you suggest we do? Krellface leaned back, his scales slowly returning to green. Find the ship, return the children, and pray they don't find out before we do. Back on the bug box, the kids huddled in their glowing cell, whispering. Jack leaned in close to Nova and Wrench Boy. They follow the same routine every time they come in. Always 3 of them, always at the same times, always carrying that little stick thing to open the door. Nova nodded, and they scan us from head to toe every time, but they don't search us. I've already stashed 2 of those weird cube things they gave us. Wrench Boy grinned, pulling a tiny piece of metal from his sock. And I've been collecting bits and pieces. Give me one more day, and I can figure out how to trick that door. On the far side of the room, little Kevin, the youngest, just 8 years old, sat crying quietly. Jack got up, walked over, and put a hand on his shoulder. Don't worry, he said softly. We're getting out of here. My dad always says every problem has a solution. And humans? We're really good at finding them. Even Wrench Boy cracked a smile at that. Overhead, the bug box floated silently through hyperspace, blissfully unaware that the tiny, adorable, seemingly harmless creatures in its hold were already planning to burn the whole ship down from the inside out. Because humans? They're cute right up until the moment they aren't. By day 3 of their so-called specimen observation, the kids had settled into a routine, which is to say, outwardly they played along, lining up for their scans like good little subjects, nibbling the weird alien bread cubes, and pretending to be sufficiently confused and cowed. And inwardly, they were already halfway to commandeering the ship. It was always the same. Every 6 hours, like clockwork, the clackroaches would open the door to the glowing green IKEA prison room and scuttle in. 3 of them, like a really incompetent boy band, always carrying the same silver stick that opened the door. Always humming and clicking like the kids weren't right there watching and memorizing every move. Jack had noticed it first. They don't check us, he whispered one evening as they huddled against the wall while the bugs scanned them yet again. They don't even look in our pockets. Wrench Boy, who now had a respectable collection of pilfered screws, metal shavings, and whatever else he could pocket without notice, grinned like someone who'd just been told Christmas was coming early. They think we're harmless, he said, rolling a tiny coil of wire between his fingers. Nova, naturally, was already mapping the ship in her head. She'd been counting every turn they were taking on the way to and from the testing rooms, marking landmarks like an odd blue vent or a squeaky floor tile in her memory. They always take us left, then down the hall with the blue light before turning right, she recited during a planning session on the floor. And the door to the little hangar with the pods is 2 turns past that. Penny, the science team girl, piped up, and there's a big room with screens just before that. Looked like it had star charts on it. Control room? Nova asked. Probably, Penny said. Wrench Boy nodded approvingly, already scheming. All right. Map, door, tools, pods. We can work with this. That night, while most of the younger kids dozed, Jack, Nova, and Wrench Boy sat in a tight circle in the corner of the room. On the glowing green floor, Nova used a piece of metal Wrench Boy had sharpened to etch a crude map of what they knew of the ship so far. If Noah can get the door open, Jack whispered, and the clackroaches stick to their schedule, we'll have 20 minutes before they come back. Not much time, Nova frowned. Jack smirked. Plenty for us. We'll split up. Nova, you take 5 kids and find the control room. Wrench Boy, you stay here with the little ones. I'll take my group to the escape pods. The next morning, they were ready. When the clackroaches entered carrying breakfast cubes, Jack watched closely. One of them, predictably, set the silver stick down to pick up an empty food container. Jack kicked a little ball, made from scraps of cloth and frustration, under a table. The clacker-roach turned to retrieve it. Wrench Boy struck. Like a snake, he slid across the floor and snatched the silver stick, tucking it into his shirt before the bug turned back. Easy. Too easy. Once the clacker-roaches left, Wrench Boy sat cross-legged and set to work dismantling the stick with a piece of wire. Can you figure it out? Nova asked. Wrench Boy grinned. It's just a fancy garage door opener. Give me an hour. Meanwhile, back on Earth, the grown-ups had stopped pretending they weren't worried. The camp was swarming with police, rangers, reporters, and enough frantic parents to power a small city. And still, no trace. But in a nondescript bunker under Colorado, Chief of Space Defense Alan Mitchell was watching a very different set of screens. Sir, his aide said, the energy signature detected 3 days ago matches what we've been tracking for years. Mitchell nodded grimly. Pine Lake Camp, the aide added. Mitchell muttered something unprintable, then stood. Call the president. Tell her we're activating the Prometheus protocol. Within hours, in an underground hangar in Antarctica, 5 sleek, impossible-looking spacecraft, Earth's worst-kept secret, roared to life. The USS Vanguard, reverse-engineered from salvaged alien wreckage and powered by human determination and caffeine, was prepped for launch. On board, Captain Olivia Grant stood at the helm, steady as ever, issuing orders. Her mission: retrieve the kids. Back on the bug box, Wrench Boy finally managed to bypass the locking mechanism on the silver stick. The door hissed open. Jack looked at the group of kids, who were now wide-eyed and ready. Everyone remember the plan? He whispered. Nova grabbed a strip of cloth she'd torn from her shirt. Use these to mark corners so you don't get lost, she instructed. Jack nodded at Wrench Boy. Let's go. The door slid open. 2 groups slipped into the corridor. Jack and his crew heading left toward the escape pods, Nova and hers going right toward the control room. Wrench Boy stayed behind with the youngest kids, ready to hold the line if anything went wrong. Jack's group moved fast and quiet, ducking into alcoves whenever they heard a clicking noise. Left, down the blue hall. Jack whispered. Right. There it is. The escape pod room. It was smaller than he'd expected, but 6 sleek, egg-shaped pods sat waiting, lights softly pulsing as though they wanted to be stolen. How do we launch them? Penny asked. Jack stared at the controls, which were covered in alien glyphs. We figured out, he said. Meanwhile, Nova's team reached the control room. The place was empty, which should have been a good thing, except for the enormous array of screens displaying ship schematics, star maps, and one rather conspicuous feed of their own cell. Look at this, said Sam, pointing to one display. This has to be the door controls. And this one's communications. Nova grinned. She pressed something that looked vaguely like a microphone. Hello, she said, her voice cracking slightly. Anyone out there? We're children from Earth, and we've been taken by these bug things. Please help. Her voice echoed through the entire ship. Even the clacker-roaches stopped in their tracks, stunned at the sound of human English coming over the speakers. Back in the cell room, Wrench Boy looked up as the younger kids stared at him, wide-eyed. That's probably Nova, he said with a satisfied nod. And then the door hissed all the way open. 3 clacker-roach guards stormed in, clicking furiously, eyes blazing. Wrench Boy stepped in front of the littlest kids. Run, he shouted. The younger kids bolted, scattering like marbles. One clacker-roach lunged at him, and Wrench Boy did the only logical thing. He flung a handful of stolen screws right into the bug's compound eyes. It screeched and stumbled back. Not so harmless now, are we? Wrench Boy muttered. Meanwhile, elsewhere in the galaxy, the Vanguard dropped out of faster-than-light travel on the edge of the Cygnus system. On the bridge, Captain Grant narrowed her eyes at the tiny blip on her display. There it is, she said. Behind her, Doug and Claire Monroe, Jack and Nova's parents, stood watching silently, pale but unflinching. That's where they are? Doug asked. Yes, Grant said. That's where we get them back. On a separate scanner, another small ship appeared. Grant frowned. That's not ours. Inside that ship, Commander Krellface sat beside his smuggler buddy, Zan. We'll be there in 5 minutes, Zan said. Krellface's scales rippled darkly. And we have company, Zan added. Krellface glanced at the scanner. The human ship. The Vanguard. That's not possible, he muttered. Oh, it's possible, Sin said dryly. And they look mad. Back on the bug box, Jack and his team had figured out how to open the pods, but not yet how to launch them. He froze when he heard Nova's voice come over the intercom again, this time louder and clearer. Attention! We're not your specimens. We're not your experiment. We're your problem. Help us, anyone who's listening. Jack grinned. That's my sister. Just then, Wrench Boy and the younger kids skidded into the room. Guards are coming. Wrench Boy warned. Jack turned to the others. Get ready. Whatever happens next, we don't stop until we're home. Above them, in orbit, 2 ships, 1 human, 1 reptilian, approached like wolves circling a wounded deer. And inside the bug box, the kids stood ready, fists clenched, eyes sharp. The Clackaroaches had made a mistake. They'd assumed humans were harmless. And now they were about to find out just how wrong they were. If the ZTH ship's day could have gotten worse, it didn't know it yet. But it was about to find out. The kids were loose. The humans were here. And diplomacy was about to take a back seat to human indignation and some good old-fashioned audacity. The USS Vanguard emerged from hyperspace like an avenging angel made of alloy and spite, settling into orbit at the edge of the Cygnus system with its weapons systems humming just below the threshold of polite. On its bridge, Captain Olivia Grant stood with her hands clasped behind her back, staring at the tiny insect-shaped blip on her view screen. That's the ZTH ship? She asked. Her comms officer nodded. Yes, Captain. Transponder confirms. It's the hive mind. Behind her, Doug and Claire Monroe leaned forward, practically pressing their noses to the screen. That's where they are? Claire whispered. Grant gave her a curt nod. That's where we bring them home. Doug clenched his fists. Claire took a deep breath. Neither of them looked the least bit intimidated by the fact that they were orbiting an alien planet aboard a ship powered by cannibalized UFOs. Humans adapt quickly when you steal their kids. On board the ZTH vessel, chaos had already set in. Alarms blared. Children ran amok through the corridors. Nova's voice still echoed over the ship-wide intercom, repeating her defiant plea for help like an angry battle hymn. We're children from Earth, and we've been taken by these bug things. Please help. Also, they smell funny. In the escape pod bay, Jack's group barricaded the door with a massive crate, while Penny frantically poked at the pod controls. Why won't they launch? Penny hissed. Jack smirked. Relax. Wrenchbowl figured it out. He's practically married to that silver stick by now. On cue, Wrenchboy, dragging half a dozen little kids and looking slightly disheveled from throwing screws at guards, skidded into the room. I found Lily and the others, he said between gulps of air, and also maybe started a small electrical fire in the hallway, but you're welcome. Jack's grin widened. That's our boy. Meanwhile, elsewhere in the ship, Nova's group had done the impossible. They not only accessed the control room, but also managed to partially activate the ship's weapon systems. She hadn't meant to. Really, she'd just been poking buttons on what looked like a comms panel, trying to send a more powerful distress signal, and suddenly the ship's exterior weapons charged up and targeted. The Vanguard. Oops, she muttered as alarms shrieked louder. Sam paled. Did you just aim the bug guns at our own ship? Shut up, Sam. I'm fixing it. On the bridge of the Vanguard, the tension thickened as hostile targeting sensors locked onto their hull. Captain, cried the tactical officer. The ZTH have powered their weapons and locked on. Grant's lips pressed into a thin line. Raise shields. Ready countermeasures. Open a channel. The comms officer did, and the screen flickered to reveal the ZTH researcher in charge, who looked about as confused as an alien with compound eyes could look. This is Captain Olivia Grant of the Earth vessel Vanguard. She began crisply. You have taken human children. Return them immediately, or we will take them by force. The ZTH stared at her for a moment. Then its translator crackled to life. These specimens were collected legally under Confederation protocols. Research is underway. Please stand by until it is complete. Doug Monroe shoved past Grant, practically grabbing the microphone. Those are our children, you six-legged nightmare. He barked. You don't research kids, you send them home. The ZDH was visibly startled, but still tried to maintain the smug, bureaucratic tone of a creature who thought it had the upper hand. We assure you the specimens are unharmed and will be returned at the conclusion of our... At that exact moment, another ship, much smaller and sleeker, latched onto the ZTH vessel with a satisfying thunk. On board the second ship, Commander Krellface strode confidently into the corridor of the hive mind, followed by his amphibious smuggler friend Zan, who was already muttering about hazard pay. "We're inside," Zan quipped as he checked his blaster. "So what's the plan?" Krellface's scales darkened ominously. "We find the children and get them off this ship before the humans turn it into confetti." Back in the control room, Nova was frantically trying to disable the weapons she'd accidentally activated. Wrenchboy arrived just in time to push her out of the way and start tinkering. "Stop making it worse," he said. "I was sending a message." Nova shot back. "Well, now you're sending missiles." Within a minute, Wrenchboy managed to shut the weapons down entirely, leaving the Vanguard unharmed, but now very, very impatient. In the ZTH control center, the researcher was being shouted at from 3 directions at once. Captain Grant issuing veiled threats over the comms. Doug Monroe bellowing like a dad whose lawn had just been trampled. And now, in person, Commander Krellface, who stormed in, grabbed the ZTH by its carapace and hissed, "You are in violation of Confederation Secret Protocol 7. The room went dead silent. The ZTH's antennae twitched. "You wouldn't dare invoke that." Krellface tightened his grip. "Try me." While the adults argued, the kids finally regrouped in the escape pod bay, all 23 accounted for, slightly bruised but beaming with adrenaline and pride. When Krellface and Zan arrived to collect them, Jack stepped in front of his group, arms folded, eyes narrowed. "We're not going back to the cell," he announced. Krellface crouched to Jack's level, raising both clawed hands in a gesture of peace. "I'm Commander Krell of the Galactic Confederation," he said gravely. "I'm here to help. Your parents are on a human ship outside. They came across space to find you." Jack froze, then exchanged glances with Nova and Wrenchboy. "Our parents?" "Yes," Krellface confirmed. "And they are impressively angry." Nova actually smiled at that. Minutes later, under the watchful gaze of Captain Grant, Krellface, and Zan, the ZTH finally agreed, loudly, bitterly, and with as much grace as a species of bureaucratic beetles could muster, to release the children. The kids filed onto the Vanguard one by one, met at the airlock by their tearful, furious, relieved parents. Jack ran straight to his father, who swept him up without a word. Nova wrapped herself around her mother's waist. Wrenchboy casually leaned against the wall like none of this fazed him, until his mom tackled him in a hug anyway. Captain Grant, watching the reunion, finally allowed herself the faintest smile. On the Vanguard's bridge, Grant turned to Krellface as the ZTH ship slowly retreated, defeated and humiliated. "Thank you," she said. Krellface inclined his head. "Earth has a friend in the galaxy now. But I suggest you prepare. The rest of the galaxy needs to understand that humans are not to be trifled with." Grant nodded grimly. "And what about the ZTH?" "They'll face the full weight of Confederation justice," Krellface replied. "And I will personally see to it they regret ever mistaking your young for research material." In the escape pod bay, Jack sat with Nova and Wrenchboy, staring out the viewport at the stars. "We did it," Nova said softly. Wrenchboy grinned. "No, they did it," he said, jerking his thumb toward the parents and the human crew. "We just bought them time to show up." Jack shook his head. "We did it together," he said. And outside, in the void, 2 ships, 1 human, 1 Confederation, hung side by side, quietly rewriting the rules of the galaxy. The Clackaroaches would tell this story for centuries, of course, about how they'd once dared to kidnap human children and learn the hard way what happens when humans decide to practice diplomacy. Because in the end, diplomacy is just war spoken slowly, and humans happen to speak both languages fluently. It took less than a week for humanity to go from "we don't know, we're not alone" to "we're already causing paperwork for the entire galaxy." The children came home. The Clackaroaches got their carapaces handed to them in court. And humanity? Oh, humanity found itself staring down the stars, cracking its knuckles, and saying, All right, who's next? When the Vanguard touched down at a secret airfield back on Earth, the 23 children walked out of the hatch like conquering heroes. To everyone else, the press, the public, even the camp counselors, the official story was that the kids had been lost in the forest for a few days and suffered some kind of collective disorientation. Of course, only the parents, the Vanguard's crew, and a handful of people in very serious suits knew the truth. That these kids had not only survived an alien abduction, but had also embarrassed the ZTH so badly it became the most watched trial in Confederation history. Back in Montana, life looked normal. On the surface, Jack, Nova, and Wrenchboy, along with 5 of the other kids, now attended special classes in an unmarked building on the outskirts of town. From the outside, it looked like a perfectly ordinary school. On the inside, holograms, alien instructors, and a curriculum that covered topics like introduction to galactic politics and how not to trigger an interstellar incident again. 6 months after their return, Jack sat in class, idly spinning his crystal, the one Krellface had given him, between his fingers. On Krellface's homeworld, crystals like this were given to young warriors for bravery and leadership. Jack figured he'd earned it. So had the others. The door slid open, and Ms. Porter, their teacher, former NASA scientist, current wrangler of interstellar mischief makers, stepped aside to let someone else in. Commander Krellface. The kids immediately sat straighter in their seats. Even Wrenchboy stopped fiddling with the door lock. Krellface inclined his head in greeting. "Hello, young humans," he said, his voice deep and smooth. "I bring news from a Confederation." He let that hang in the air for dramatic effect, because of course he did. "Earth," he continued, "has been granted observer status, which means your planet is now officially in the neighborhood. You will attend the ceremony." The kids traded glances. Wrenchboy raised his hand. "Will there be snacks?" Krellface's reptilian face betrayed nothing. "Yes." "Then we're in," Wrenchboy said. On the day of the ceremony, the kids and their parents were whisked aboard Krellface's diplomatic vessel. Jack and Nova's dad, Doug, spent the trip marveling at the ship's engineering. Their mom, Claire, spent it asking Krellface increasingly sharp questions about the Confederation's laws, their legal protections, and what exactly Protocol 7 meant. Meanwhile, Wrenchboy tried to figure out how many parts of the ship he could pocket without anyone noticing. Krellface tolerated all of this with the patience of someone who'd long ago accepted that humans were basically chaos with thumbs. When they arrived at the neutral planet of Nexus, the council chamber was lit like a cathedral. Delegates from dozens of species packed the Great Hall. Banners of every color and design hung from the walls. Holographic projectors painted the air with symbols and translations. When the humans entered, led by the children, of course, the room fell silent. Jack noticed several delegates shift uncomfortably in their seats. Good. Nova noticed others staring at her, like she was a ticking time bomb. Also good. And Wrenchboy loudly whispered, "We should have brought a boombox," and played the Rocky theme. Not wrong. The Volk's elder stood first, his gnarled hands raised in acknowledgement. On behalf of the Confederation, he intoned, "We welcome Earth into our assembly as an observer world." Jack glanced at Krellface, who gave him a subtle nod. Nova stepped forward and spoke. "On behalf of Earth," she said clearly, "we accept, and we promise not to break anything, on purpose." There was polite chuckling, although some of the laughter sounded nervous. Wrenchboy muttered under his breath, "Give it a week." After the ceremony, Krellface led the humans to a smaller chamber, away from the flashing cameras and applause. "You made quite an impression," he said dryly. Doug raised an eyebrow. "Was that good or bad?" Krellface paused. "Yes. Back home, life returned to what passed for normal in Montana. Sort of." Jack, Nova, and Wrenchboy still attended the special school, now supplemented by occasional lessons from holographic instructors on galactic languages and interspecies etiquette. The ZTH, meanwhile, had been fined so heavily that even their grandkids would still be paying it off. They also had to send an official apology to Earth, which read, in its entirety, "We regret any inconvenience caused by our wholly legal and culturally appropriate research methods. We have reevaluated our specimen acquisition protocols in light of recent events. Please do not vaporize us." It was framed and hung in the kids' classroom. One evening, Doug and Claire invited Wrench Boy and his parents over for dinner. After the kids left the table, Claire turned to Doug. "You know they're going to end up working for the Confederation one day," she said softly. Doug nodded. "They already are," he admitted. Later that night, Jack sat by his bedroom window, staring up at the stars. Somewhere out there, dozens of ships, Confederation, smugglers, explorers, zipped between systems. Earth's name was now whispered in those ships, sometimes with respect, sometimes with fear, but always with interest. Jack glanced at the crystal on his nightstand. It glowed faintly in the dark, just as Krellface had said it would. He picked it up, turning it over in his hand. "We're not so different, your people and mine," Krellface had told him. "We protect our young. We keep our promises, and we do not forgive those who hurt us." Jack smiled faintly. The galaxy had no idea what it had unleashed. Above Earth, invisible to the public, several Confederation ships now came and went under new protocols. No abductions, no experiments, no interference without express human consent. In orbit, Krellface stood at the viewport of his own ship, watching the blue planet below. It was beautiful, yes, but it was also dangerous. A predator that had been forced to notice the rest of the jungle. And the rest of the jungle was now noticing back. 6 months after the ceremony, the kids sat around their school's lunch table, eating cafeteria pizza under the watchful gaze of Ms. Porter. Nova stabbed a piece of crust with her fork. "So," she said, "what's next?" Wrench Boy leaned back, grinning. "Oh, he said, more language lessons, more galactic politics, more accidentally scaring the crap out of entire civilizations just by existing." Jack smirked. "Business as usual," he said. And far above them, among the stars, the whispers began anew. "Have you heard? The humans are awake now. We thought they were primitive. They thought we were harmless. We were both wrong. Because when you steal human children, you don't just start a rescue mission. You start a story. And humans? Oh, humans write their stories in fire.